Crusaders. I am Brooke Plack, your host here today on the Grit Crusade podcast. For those of you who are new, welcome to the channel and welcome to joining us as we dive into getting real in the trenches of life, relationships, and business, because that's what we're all about. It's being real, talking about real things. So today you're joining us for episode 3 in a little mini series, my first mini series ever on work life flow. So, you've probably heard people talk about work life balance, maybe, or even like work life integration, kind of a fancier way to say it. But for me and my journey, I've learned that everything in life comes in seasons and everything is a little bit more about figuring out a flow or a rhythm. So, that's why we're coining the term here work life flow. Okay, so if you're new on the podcast, then you may know, you may not know, but sometimes the episodes are just me and you, like today. And sometimes episodes are with some really amazing guests that I get to have on here and they tell their story. So today, since we're in this little mini series of work life flow, it's just going to be me and you talking about what this looks like and how it shows up in your life. And so I think something that's really important to say here is my flow is not your flow. And your flow is not anyone else's flow. So, all the tips and things that I talk about today and the challenges I've faced are just my experience. And my hope is that you leave with being more inspired and more thoughtful and maybe even more intentional about the way these ideas are showing up in your life. So, if this is your first episode or you didn't catch the 2 episodes before this, we'll be sure and link those down in the comments for you. But our first episode in the Work Life Flow mini series was about mind and body and how important sleep is and how we treat our minds and how we serve our bodies, and our bodies are the ones really carrying around our minds and our souls, allows us to have a bigger impact and purpose here on earth. And then the second episode was about our friends and social life, and I was being totally vulnerable with you guys on this one because that's not a strength of mine, and just kind of talking to you about what it's like to be an introverted extrovert and how it's okay not to be like somebody that's on the beach with 20 other people. For some people, that's extremely exhausting. So, figuring out what this flow looks like in your life is so important, even if it's different from mine or different from someone else's that you're friends with. So, knowing that this is a very individualized experience, I feel like helps kind of relieve the whole this is what I should be doing concept, right? So, today's topic is going to be about spirituality and our spiritual life. And so, I'm going to read you some statistics, kind of a description of how this can show up in your life. But I want to preface that by saying spirituality is not the same thing as going to church. Okay. So if this episode you tuned in today with a little hesitation, thinking, is she just going to talk about how much I should be going to church? No, I'm not, because spirituality is so much more about our human existence and a natural part of our beings, that it's not about going to church or not. It's not about a denomination or not, and shows up in so many other ways. So let's jump into this. So, according to the Royal College of Psychiatrists, which is in the United Kingdom, and I'm a huge look outside the box, not just at what we're doing in America person. This is how they define spirituality. Spirituality involves exploring certain universal themes: love, compassion, altruism, life after death, wisdom, and truth, with the knowledge that some people, such as saints or enlightened individuals, have achieved and manifested higher levels of development than the ordinary person. And I think I agree with that, because I feel like that if somebody is really into their body and fitness and nutrition, they're going to have achieved a higher level of development than maybe me. Okay. Or if someone's really attuned to their finances and spends a lot of time growing in the financial area, they're going to have a higher level of development. So it lends to believe that spirituality is the same way, right? Like if you spend more time focusing on this and being attuned to your spiritual gifts and callings and just being, that you're going to have a higher level of development. So that really like um, I think I was raised missionary Baptist as a child, and I completely associated spirituality with church. But I think if we can erase that, or just maybe even look at it from a different lens and realize that it's so much more than just church. Okay. All right. And then the University of Minnesota here in the US, the United States, has a Center for Spirituality and Healing. And so this came directly from their website, and I felt so connected to what they were saying. I didn't feel like there was any reason to rewrite it, right? I just wanted to share it with you. And then we're going to jump into our fun segment, okay? So the University of Minnesota's Center for Spirituality and Healing says that spirituality is a broad concept with room for many perspectives. In general, it includes a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves and typically involves a search for meaning in life. As such, it is a universal human experience that touches us all, and people may describe a spiritual experience as sacred or transcendent, or simply a deep sense of aliveness and interconnectedness. Some may find their spiritual life is let me try that again, is intricately linked to their association with a church, temple, mosque, or synagogue, but others may pray and find comfort in a personal relationship with God or a higher power. Still, others seek meaning through their connection to nature and art. Like your sense of purpose, your personal definition of spirituality may change throughout your life, adapting to your own experiences and relationships. And I think the big takeaway from that is that for most of us, we don't fall into any of those like phrases, right? It's probably more of a blend. More people lean more, some people rather lean more knowledge based and knowledge driven, and they want to know scripture, they want to read ancient text. Some people may lend more, like prayer and feeling and connectedness with God or a higher power. But I'm here to tell you today that your spiritual life is part of who you are. Now, how much you lean into that is you, and it has to do with your flow in life. Okay. So there is a higher power that created us. There is good and evil. From there, it's up to you to figure out what it is you believe. And I think that rather than and I am a Christian, and rather being a Christian that comes at things saying, this is what you should believe and this is how it is, people first have to feel a connection with something bigger than themselves. And I think that's where we all start. And from there, we start going, what is that connection? What is that higher power? But it all can start with things that are really simple and minute in our lives, and little changes that help us get there, because spirituality is frankly kind of daunting, and it's a little intimidating because you want to do it right until you realize, like everything else we talk about on this podcast, there is no doing everything right. There is morals and values, but the way you do things it's your way and it's unique to you. I think that's really important in our spiritual life. So, all right. So we're going to take a break from me giving you statistics and bogging your brain down and really making you think, and do something fun on the podcast that I call Trivia in the Trenches. So this is where I ask you a trivia question, and if I have a guest, I'll ask them as well, but I don't give you enough time to look it up, and then usually give you some fun facts to go along with it. So here we go. Trivia in the Trenches. Which of the seven dwarfs wore glasses or wears glasses? Dun, 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 dun. Doc! Oh, yeah, I know. My brain first went to is it Sleepy? Is it Sneezy? Is it Dopey? Dopey was my favorite seven dwarfs. So if you're watching this on YouTube, drop in the comments, or if you're watching it on Facebook, link through Facebook, drop it in the Facebook post comments, and tell me which of the seven dwarfs is your favorite dwarf. Because Dopey has always been mine. I think it's because he's so carefree and the opposite of who I was when I was young. So a really type A, intense personality. But just a few fun facts to go along with this. So Doc is the dwarf that wears glasses, but Snow White was Disney's first full-length film, and is still the highest grossing film of all time for them. Yeah, that's pretty cool, huh? You don't realize that Snow White's really been around a long, long time. But So if you're like, oh, what are all the seven dwarfs names? And you'll probably figure it out, or you could Google it. But this is the funner trivia of what other names that Disney was considering to name the dwarfs. Okay, ready? Biggie Wiggy or Big O Ego, Blabby, Deafy, Dirty, Gabby, Gaspy, Gloomy, Hoppy Jumpy, Hotsy, Jaunty, Nifty, and Shifty, right? I think Biggie Wiggy takes the win there. Like, I feel like if we did like a 2023 like real life remake, that they need another dwarf, like the eighth dwarf, that's Biggie Wiggy. I don't know. I think that was pretty fun. So, so there's your trivia in the trenches segment. Just something fun that we like to do that's not always related to the topic. So, all right, back to our topic today of work life flow. So, we're talking about this concept of spirituality and how that shows up in our life and how that is different than church or just reading your Bible or just saying, I don't believe in anything, or I'm an atheist, or I'm agnostic. Like, I think that a while back, I had a conversation with one of my husband's friends who is agnostic. And it was that first step of him acknowledging that there is a higher power, but not knowing what it is. And now he has leaned into that, explored to that, and become a Christian. And so I think that us realizing that we, on a soul level, on a mind level, are connected to everything that happens in this world is huge. And sometimes we get so busy, which I feel like is the devil's greatest tool is busyness, because it keeps us distracted and we're not able to focus on the things that really matter. And when we take time to get away and get quiet and get still, we realize, like, we feel the intuition, we feel a knowing. Like, there's a reason the pyramids were built in Egypt and we didn't have all the technology we had today, because that power is right within our brains. We have the power within us to do great, impossible, amazing things. But we can't do any of that if we don't lean into this idea of, where do I fit in into this big picture? How does my impact on the world make a big difference? Okay. And so I think it starts small. And like I said earlier in the podcast, it can be very big and daunting, but it's just a few small intentional steps leaning in the right direction, making some acknowledgments, and being intentional that can change everything. And so we're going to talk about 5 different ways that I keep thinking about Biggie Wiggy over here. As I'm talking, I can't help it. I keep like wanting to laugh about, and the Biggie Wiggy said, I don't know, like if I think it's like Notorious B.I.G. or something. I don't know. But anyway, okay, I'm going to be serious and like put Biggie Wiggy in it. Or maybe I'll come up with like a rap by the end of the podcast and then I can like wrap it out. So, okay. So, we're going to talk about 5 ways that we can lean into this spirituality or spiritual aspect in our lives. And these are things that have worked for me. This is not an all encompassing list. This is not a end all be all. You need to do it like this. These are just some tips that have worked for me. And I love getting feedback from our listeners and viewers. So, you can always email me at chat@brookeplack.com. And that way we can connect with each other. I get lots of DMs on Facebook and Instagram, and sometimes I don't check those as often as I should. So shooting me an email is a great way for us to get connected, ask questions, or give me new ideas for, if you have more to add to these episodes, because we can always do a part 2 or a part A, or I don't know what you do when you have a 5-part series and you want to do a like sub series. I don't know if that's a word. Maybe I made it up. I don't know. All right. So the first thing that you can do that kind of gets you into this headspace is meditation. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a story about a girl, me, that's me, I'm the girl, who spent 2 years putting on my life plan and goals that I wanted to start a meditation practice. And I didn't do it because I thought there was a right way to do it. And I didn't know how. I was literally like getting in my own way. So this is the easiest way to start meditation. This is not a paid promotion. This is not me, trying to put something down that I'm getting paid for, but using an app. Okay. We are app friendly in this world. We are used to technology and we like listening and watching things. And so there is an app. There's tons of apps in the App Store. I've used several of them, but the one that I like the most is called Headspace, and we will link it in the show notes. But Headspace lets you change the speaker. So like I have this like guy with like an Australian accent that like just makes me happy because I think Australian accents are really cool. But you can change the speaker, whether you want a male or a female. You can change the speed. You can choose the length of the meditation. So maybe you have arrived at a doctor's appointment early. You're 7 minutes early. You want to walk in 5 minutes early. You can do a 2 minute meditation. Or maybe you are further in your meditation journey than I am, and you're probably not going to want to be listening to my beginner tips basically in this podcast, but maybe you can do 20 or 30 minutes or an hour long. And then once you start meditating and creating stillness, you're going to notice that your brain starts to wander and go crazy places. And then you're going to be like, oh, I'm not doing it right. No, you actually are doing it right. You're starting to notice what your brain is doing. So if you haven't watched my mind and body episode in this workflow series, go back and watch it. We'll link it in the show notes. But your mind is not the same thing as your brain or your body. It wonders and has a little power of its own self. And so your mind, you acknowledging that your mind is thinking about something else is okay. You're not a meditation failure. You just bring it back to center. You bring it back to what your focus is on, and it will wander again because it is powerful. Remember, I said your mind is very powerful. Our body isn't in service of our mind, and it carries us around. This is all part of our spiritual development and spiritual journey that we learn and start to realize that there are some very different things happening in our bodies at all times, but we are ultimately responsible for this journey or this flow that we choose for our lives. So, starting a small meditation and stillness practice, it will change your anxiety, it will change your depression, it will allow you to process grief, it will help you get off of medications. I'm saying it here as personal experience. It will help you be aware of your diet, your activity levels. It will help you get off of Netflix. I love me some good Netflix shows, but there is something that happens in our body when we are still and focusing on nothing else but what is happening on the inside of us that can change our whole lives. And that's where manifestation starts. And I'm not a manifestation expert, but I do feel like I should probably have a guest on about manifestation. So if you don't know about manifestation, Google that because it's really good. Okay, so starting a meditation practice is huge in starting to become spiritually attuned. Okay. The next thing is cultivating your emotional intelligence. All right. So if you've ever met me in person or listened to me much, I'm a very like high strung, high active, like my brain is always firing all the time. So you can imagine me as like a moody little teenager, right? I can't imagine what it was like to go to high school with me, but I didn't even notice what other people were doing. I was never somebody sitting there gossiping and talking about people because I was so busy with what I was doing. I had no idea what everyone else was doing. And so I wasn't noticing and picking up on these emotional cues. And as I went into leadership and started my own companies, I have a very dear friend, Lisa Weeks, who works with me and was like, you can't talk to people like that. And I'm like, what do you mean I can't talk to people like that? I'm just being honest. And she was like, not everyone responds the same way. Not everyone is able to hear your heart when you are being so blunt and so upfront and so black and white. Like, I'm one of those people, I've always been like, you either love me or hate me. You always know where you stand with me. I'm never going to talk behind your back because I'm going to say it to your face. And I still feel that way, but I've also refined my approach some. And I'm not there yet, right? I don't know if I'll ever have be a master at emotional intelligence and communication, but Lisa began to teach tools to our companies called the Enneagram, and we will link those in the show notes for you to see, for you to look at as well. There's some free tests online you can take. There's tons of books about Enneagrams, but I was originally a 138, and your Enneagram, like your personality, can kind of change over time. And so now I am an 817. So I'm getting a little whoop whoop fun in my life. The sevens out there, I feel like have all the free spirited fun. So I think I'm leaning into that spiritual side of myself and getting to know myself better. But creating a environment and cultivating emotional intelligence and being able to start to see the world through other people's lenses lets us all realize how individual and unique each one of us are, and lets us start to connect to how individual and unique we are in this world, because that realizing there's no should, realizing it's okay to take our own path, and realizing it's okay for everyone else to take their own paths, because I'm a recovering fixer over here, that lets us start to see this soul and spiritual world that's living around us all the time. And so, a side note before I go on to the next step, if you've not ever watched Stranger Things, it is like so crazy. So the upside down world is going on at the same time as like the normal world, and I kind of think we live like that right now. Like there is a whole world of spiritual warfare and evil going on that the good spirits and angels and warriors from heaven are battling against as we live in this world. And so I feel like the more we start to kind of march along our spiritual journey and awakening our spiritual sides, we start to be in tune with that and can start to feel that around us. So that wasn't really a tip. It was just kind of like notes from Brooke, right? So working on our meditation practice, cultivating our emotional intelligence. And then this one has been probably the most important and hardest lesson I have learned in my personal journey is practicing self love. So I am my own worst critic. And I grew up in a small town in Arkansas. I was a cheerleader. I went to college. I did all these things just like you're supposed to, and all of this. And so I had a picture in my head of who I was supposed to be. And I don't know if it's just trauma or tragedy or PTSD that let me start to let go of all that. Like there is no supposed to in life. And figuring out what I love and feel good about has been so fun and cool for my journey because, I don't have to want to be into sports and watch sports on TV all the time because that's what Americans love to do. That's not what I love to do. Like I've cheered on the biggest fields in Division 1 athletics and I loved it and it was amazing, but I'm not a huge sports fan. I was just a Razorback fan and I just wanted to be a cheerleader and I loved it. But that doesn't have to define who I am now. So who you were doesn't have to be who you are. And it's up to us at any time to change that path and change that direction. But unless we are in tune with how we truly feel about that and our spirit that lives within us, we're not going to know what that is. And we're going to continue to go through the motions and feel unfulfilled and unhappy and not sure who we really are. And so being able to practice that self forgiveness, not being embarrassed because I feel this way. Like it's okay if you feel different than other people. We as humans are not the great judge of all things. It is not up to us to tell you how you should or should not be living. Okay. There is a spiritual and religious aspect to spirituality and good and evil and right and wrong. But I am not in charge of telling someone you should not be living with another woman because you're a woman and it is bad for you to be gay. Okay. Then you need to turn that finger right back around to me and tell me about all the things that are bad for me. All right. Our spiritual development is about love and compassion and being there for other people in community. And it's not about us all saying what is right or wrong. Okay. There are historical texts, the Bible. I'm a Christian. I believe in the Bible. Do I do everything exactly what the Bible says? No, because you know what? I'm not Jesus. And I have to realize that I'm a flawed human, like we all are. But it's not up to me to be the great judge of, all the things that you do in your life. But it is up to me to tune into my intuition, my knowing, my spirituality, and to lean in and love others. And being able to free yourself of being the judger and being the great judgment and the line in the sand and not talking to family members and friends because they believe differently than you. Did Jesus sit down at the table with tax collectors who were like the bad guys of the Bible? Yes, because if you don't have a seat at the table, you're never going to be able to have influence over people. And so that includes having that kind of acceptance and love for ourselves because we can't be so hard on ourselves. And I'm the one who's always been like, you should be doing this, you should be doing this, you should be doing this. But like sometimes I just need to be. I just need to be able to be and be me and be a weird adult that loves Disney and thinks crowns and baby dolls are fabulous and doesn't love pink. And I like the color red, but you're girly, but I'm not really girly. But sometimes I don't want to wear makeup, and that's okay. All of those things and feelings, if we continue to push those down, to not acknowledge those, to not feel what we feel is going to lead to chronic depression, mental illness, and the other things because we are not taking the time to acknowledge all of these feelings and emotions that are going through us and knowing that that's okay to feel them. Maybe it's not okay to act on them, but you cannot become emotional stuffers because that's how we were raised. Like if I'm 38 years old, I have this theory that we were all raised by emotional stuffers because their parents and grandparents in America, especially. So if you're listening from outside the US, that may be a different time period or different generation. But in America, we had 100 years ago, we had the Great Depression. Okay. Those people's kids were born somewhere in the 50s and 60s, and that is my parents' generation. And they were raised by, you didn't have it as hard as us. You're okay. Suck it up, buttercup. Everything's going to be fine. When they raised us to be emotional stuffers like that, and we're the mental health crisis of the world right now in the United States in 2023, because we were taught not to feel, to suck it up and toughen up and be okay. And it's okay to feel all those feelings. And we can't find the spiritual stillness and look inside and feel what we feel if we are trying to constantly push all of those, things away. So finding that quiet time and that meditation, starting to become emotionally aware and practicing and cultivating emotional intelligence in ourselves and in others, and then also practicing that self-love leads exactly into our next step, which is connecting more deeply with others. And I think to create these authentic connections, we have to be real too about what it is that makes us happy. Like it's okay to be different than other people. It's okay to decline an invitation. Gretchen Jackson is a life coach in the Arkansas area, and she is the host of the Unapologetic Woman Retreat, and does a mastermind group. And Gretchen was speaking at a nonprofit event that we had over Mother's Day, and she was saying, if it's not a hell yeah, it's a hell no. Because if you don't want to go to that wedding, don't go. If you don't want to make that meeting because it's not that important to you, don't go. We have to stop somewhere and choosing to do things to make everyone else happy at the expense of ourselves and the detriment of ourselves, which that really ties into that practicing self love and knowing that what we feel and who we are is okay because our vibe attracts our tribe, right? So the people that we used to hang out with, that we used to feel good about being with, as you move along this journey of enlightenment or awareness or spiritual development, you'll start to realize that those aren't the people that you really want to spend your time with anymore. And guess what? That's okay. That's totally fine because as you start to live your more true authentic self, you will begin to attract those people that want to do life alongside, around, or near you. And and it's something divine about being spiritually connected with yourself and the other things around you. For me, it's also nature and animals and plants. It raises the vibrations in my body when I spend time taking care of my plants. And it is, if we are so busy or we are so distracted with technology and Netflix and TikTok, and all those things are fine in small doses, but at some point we've got to be with ourselves and be our own person and know that our lives, our spiritual development, our connectedness with others is all our responsibility. No one's coming in to save the day. You're an adult or maybe a teenager listening to this, and it's your life, your one go round. And so these small little tips I'm telling you today, they may not fall in order for you and they may not be the thing that changes your life forever. But if you're picking up one or two of them and starting to be intentional about the way that you are connecting with yourself, connecting with the universe, and connecting with each other, that is how you are going to start to be able to make the decisions that guide your path into who you want to be. Maybe you want to be a millionaire one day. Well, what would have to be true for you to become a millionaire? That's a big question. You would have to sit down and really think about that. And that's how we start to tune into ourselves. So, all right. So, quickly, we'll go through these steps of thinking about starting meditation practice. If it's intimidating or crazy, overwhelming to you, download an app. That's what I did. That's what works for me. And that's still what I do most of the time. I need that app guidance. Okay. So, that's the first step. And then cultivating that emotional intelligence. If you don't know about emotional intelligence, Enneagrams are a huge starting point for that. Practicing self love and knowing that it's okay to focus on you and speak your truth, connecting more deeply with others. And the last thing is practicing gratitude. So, at the beginning of every one of our meetings at our companies, we start with celebrations. So, even if it's a hard meeting, if it's, like a topic that could be maybe we're having to end someone's role or consolidate departments or whatever, we always start with celebrations. And it can be personal or professional because so many times we're always focusing on that to do list and what all still needs to get done. I know I am because I'm very type A and I've got goals and I'm driven and all of this, but like we have to also take time to look at what have we already gotten accomplished? What are we happy about? What are we celebrating about? Right. Today, I was so excited because American Girl Doll launched a Harry Potter collection, and I'm a huge Harry Potter nerd. And that's something that's really cool and quirky about me, And it might not be fun to anyone else, but it is to me. And you know what that does? It brings joy into a room. So your celebrations don't have to be that you hit the lottery, they could be that you got all your laundry done. But that's just another way that we can tune into this spirituality, this spiritual development, and this flow that we are looking at in life to become our work life flow for ourselves because ours doesn't look like anyone else's. Yours doesn't look like mine, and that's totally fine. And how you define work and how you define life also doesn't look the same. And that's okay because we're all doing our own type of work every day, whether it's volunteer, whether it's homemaking, whether it's working corporate, running small business, multi level marketing. And our life and what we want that life to look like is our responsibility. It's up to us. And as we grow together in this series, and realize that our vibe is attracting our tribe through our spiritual development and tuning into who we are, that is how we start to make all the difference in our lives. Until next time.
You've been listening to the Grit Crusade podcast with Brooke Plack. Our theme song is Thunder City by Lunar Ray, licensed through Soundstripe. This podcast was produced by Luminate Media Group. Thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.